Well, hey, folks, Jack here. Let me just get set up a little bit better. I'm running a little behind today, so I'm a little discombobulated as we come on. Be a fun subject today. I'm just making sure that we are hitting all of the streams over here on Odyssey and Float. Whoops, looks like someone pushed the wrong button. I'm not sure why that's the case. If you want to let me know what you mean about that. But anyway, we are going to launch here in just a minute with the podcast portion of the show. This will be a shorter one, and I won't be hanging that long. I don't expect a ton of after episode questions in this one. I'm not really going to talk about how to do this, more why to do this, as I see people starting to come on board on the live stream. And with that, let's go ahead and hit record, and we will get this episode of Miyagi Mornings knocked out. This is going to be episode 146. Hi, folks. Jack Spirko here with Miyagi Mornings, episode 146. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things. We're going to talk about fishing. And this is a thing I've done entire podcasts on. I've gotten deep into different types of fish, how to find places to fish, how to keep costs down so this actually makes sense from a sustainability standpoint, personal sustainability standpoint. I just kind of wanted to bring this up and discuss it with you from a standpoint of how effective it actually is. And I want to start out with kind of an admission, I guess, maybe that homesteaders have a hard time making. And that is that no matter how much we do to try to produce a lot of our own livestock food on property, unless we have really significant amounts of property and we're doing something like raising ruminants, like if you have enough acreage and you're raising a few cows and pigs and goats a year for meat for your family, you can absolutely produce all of your protein and fat, and you can do it with almost no inputs. Most of us do not have the amount of land to do that. So if we have chickens, if we have rabbits, if we have whatever, we're probably bringing in significant inputs, and they also have a need of us to take care of them. Again, like if you have a large acreage and you have cattle that are in a pretty easy to manage rotational grazing system, there's a lot of times you're not doing anything at all. Most of us, though, even just a small flock of chickens, it's a daily chore, and it ties us to our property. Additionally, things like gardening and stuff like that, I love it, but there is a fundamental limit to how much nutritional density we can produce with plants. They are basically three types of things we do for food. There's fungi, there's plant matter, and then there is animal matter. Plants are probably more nutritionally dense than fungi, like mushrooms and stuff like that, though mushrooms have some other things that they do that are pretty amazing. But plants just cannot compare to animals. So we end up in this situation where we have a certain amount of input, a certain amount of cost, a certain amount of labor for us to produce high quality fats and proteins, whether that's eggs, whether that's meat, whether that's bacon. I know bacon's a kind of meat, but I'm just kind of throwing it out there. Whereas if we're looking at it more from the standpoint of being a hunter or a trapper, we can go out and we can shoot a deer, right? We can shoot a deer, and then we have, 60, 70 pounds worth of meat out of a good sized whitetail, sometimes a bit less depending on what part of the world we are in and where we're hunting and how big the deer are. The deer that I hunted as a kid in Pennsylvania were much bigger bodied animals than we have down here in Texas. So generally, the more north, the larger the animal is. But what you'll find in much of the country with hunting is, first of all, your season is incredibly limited in time for most of the country. Number two, land access can be extremely expensive, or in places where there's lots of public land, sometimes it's so heavily hunted, chances of success go way down, just pure number of bodies. So I love to hunt. I've hunted my whole life. I will always hunt. But when I look at it from a standpoint of what is the one thing that makes use of what we would call public resources, public lands, that can put the most calories on your plate consistently throughout most of the year, no matter where you live in the United States, the answer is fishing. And if I look at it as, you know, per ounce of meat on a plate to dollar cost, I don't think anything else can come close. And if you look around the world, it is the #1 means of protein and fat sustenance for poor people throughout the world is fishing. It really is. Anywhere that it's possible, people do it. And I know sometimes people say, well, there's not a lot of fat in fish. Depends on the type of fish and what we're talking about. Now, today I'm talking about fin fish, right? I'm talking about fish that swim and we catch them on a rod or what have you. But there's actually a lot of fat and a lot of different shellfish, and that is an incredible resource used by people throughout the world, especially in impoverished areas on coastal situations. So one way or another, gathering from the water. The other thing is some fish actually are really incredible sources of fat, salmon and different trout species and all as well. Catfish have a great amount of wonderful high-quality fat in them, especially channel cats, blue cats, and once they get to a certain size, bullhead catfish as well. So there's a lot of fat available there. But #1 protein source in the world for people, especially in poor areas, is self-collected fish of some form. In the United States, we actually have an incredible bounty available to us. Yeah, flatheads too, in the live chat there. Flathead catfish definitely have a really high quality fat as well. Then in the United States, we just have this ability that almost no matter where you live, I would say within 30 minutes of your home, there's a place you can catch fish that are edible. Now, we can talk about polluted waterways and all, and some are worse than others, but in general, there's some place where the risk of that is significantly low. And if your choice is to start thinking about this as a survival topic, to starve or risk the potential that maybe it's not the most clean source of fish in the world, I would rather not starve. And I think that the other side of this is like, so go back to hunting or trapping or something like that. Not only do we have these very limited seasons, expensive access to land, the ramp up to understanding and having enough knowledge to be successful for hunting is a much more steep incline than it is for fishing. I guarantee you that anybody that picks a place or two and dedicates themselves and says, I'm going to figure out what fish are in here, what they eat, how to fish for them, your track to where you'll be able to gather fish for food is relatively shallow and short. It's not that hard. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida as a kid before the internet. I mean, way before there was anything approaching an internet. I remember being, you know, an 8-year-old kid, a 7-year-old kid, going down to the lake, watching what other people did, tying freaking fish hooks on like an idiot with a double overhand knot, doing almost everything wrong, and still being able to figure out how to catch fish. Like if I can do that at 7 or 8, then, you know, with a Zepco 202 rod and reel combo from Eckerd Drugs for like $7 back then, right? Then you can do this as a grown-ass adult and possibly with your kids and teaching them. I didn't really have that guidance. I had to go figure it out myself. The way we learned to fish back then is we got magazines like Outdoor Life and Field and Stream and stuff and read. Like you didn't go online. There wasn't all these great communities. There's so much information available today. And a lot of people tell me like they have a really hard time finding places to fish around where they live. And my #1 hack that I've been able to find places to fish that normally I guess you just wouldn't notice when you're driving around or whatever, it's been Google Earth and Google Maps. You know, you just pull up Google Maps, take a look at your area, go to the map view first, look for any blue signs of water, and then, you know, kind of start drilling into that. Then you can switch into the satellite view. You can start drilling down. And a lot of places even have street views. So I found places where creeks go across roadways. And like, okay, so is it worth me driving 30 minutes to go check this place out? If it has a street level view, I'm able to basically walk up and down the street and say, well, there's a place I could park my car. That looks like there would be access there. So yeah, that's worth doing. Or, oh, this just looks like a place you'll get run over and killed and there's no real good access. No, I'm not going to go there. Okay, then we'll follow that stream to the next place it crosses a road. and see if we can find a good access point, streams, ponds, etc. There's just tons of things like that. And, my wife just showed me a pond that I haven't fished yet, but I'm going to try pretty soon. It's only about 15 minutes from the house, and it has a sign up. It says no fishing after dark. You know what that means? Fish all you want before dark. And I don't think anybody would bother me for fishing there after dark anyway. There are just so many opportunities for fishing in the U.S. And let me tell you this, you guys that have access to salt water, you have it even better. If you live somewhere where you can easily drive to a beach, park your car, throw your shit in a cart, go down there and surf fish, there's no reason that you can't provide half of all your protein meals just from that. It doesn't take that much to learn, and it is one of the most underutilized resources I think that we have and I'm just talking the prepper homesteader space. We put all this effort into raising chickens so we can get a few dozen eggs a week or something like that. And maybe we put a lot of effort into running a meat run of chickens or ducks or something. And that all requires, again, it requires inputs, it requires time, it requires labor. I'm not speaking against it. I'm just saying, like, here you have this other thing over here where nature does all the real work. And you just go out and you just partake in the bounty. And I would say the biggest thing, and I'm asking a question right now, what is the biggest reason you don't go fishing more often? For people that like to fish, it's usually something like I don't have enough time, et cetera, and I understand that. For people that have never really done a lot of fishing, they don't claim that they like fishing, they really don't know, right? It's just a thing that they've heard about, or maybe they've gone a time or two. I think it's that they don't really understand what fishing is and what it can be. So maybe they've gone a time or two, they didn't catch anything, they were out in the weather and the weather sucked. Maybe the person they were with really didn't know what they were doing. I don't know, right? But I have never found anybody that really objects to going fishing if you can do two things. Number one, see to comfort. Right. So I think that's one of the most important things, is to make sure that, like, if you're a person that really needs a comfortable chair, that you bring a comfortable chair. I mean, to me, that's a huge thing in of itself. But having, some basic food and drink, maybe some meat, whatever it is for you. Right. And then you do catch some fish. Right. And that's just an experience learning curve. Right. And there are times when, even when you've kind of cracked the code of an area or whatever, maybe seasonality ebbs, maybe there's some sort of major pressure change due to a weather and something is impending. And sometimes those major pressure changes up or down can turn fish on. It can also turn them off. Right. So there's times when but if you generally catch fish and you see to your comfort, then I think that most people end up really enjoying it because it's spending out time outside. A lot of times when I go fishing, I set up some rod holders. I put the rods in. If I don't score a hookup on every hit, I'm okay with it. And I take out a book and I sit there and read. And it amazes me sometimes when you talk to people about fishing and they're like, well, I like to fish because it's boring or whatever. And you say, well, do you like to sit out and hang out and read or listen to music and have a couple beers? Well, yeah. Okay, well, there's no reason you can't do that with a couple rods in the water. And I think people that take more of that approach, that don't try to take it on as like some sort of super sport or something like that, where it's a failure if you don't catch the next biggest fish or whatever, tend to really enjoy themselves because, again, it is more just kind of an outdoor activity. But I personally don't know. I personally don't know of any other activity that we can engage in for so little, that is so universally approachable, that has such a high ROI from a standpoint of meat acquisition. So think about the fact that if you go to like Kroger's or Albertsons or Publix or something like that, and we just forget about like really expensive fish, just stuff like farm-raised catfish or tilapia or whatever, you're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $10 a pound for fish. And a lot of the fish that we can catch are way higher quality than that. But let's just use $7 a pound. So if you go fishing for 3 hours and you catch, I don't know, 10 pounds of fish, by the time you clean it and what have you, you end up with 10 pounds of fish, it's $70. Even if you catch 5 pounds of fish, that's $35. Now, that's not making a lot of money, but if you're taking a recreational activity and you're turning into something that nets you somewhere between $7 to $20 to $30 an hour in value, plus it's a recreational activity. And then there are times when if you really get into figuring an area out, you can do way better than that. You get into a position where you have a very, and I'm using this word again, sustainable activity. When I say sustainable, it means I'm talking in this instance that you can afford to keep doing it indefinitely. And then if we had some basic knowledge on how to store, clean, cook, and prepare our fish, then we end up with something that can contribute massively to our table and to cutting back our grocery bill. Because remember, like if we have a meal this week and it comes from fish that we went out and caught, we have very little money into that acquisition. It's not just, oh, here's $15 worth of fish. It's $15 worth of fish, plus it's $15 we didn't spend. It's a totally different way of looking at it. And this is why, where I grew up, while everybody hunted, because there was a certain value, you knew that every person of age in the family could have one deer a year. So even people in the family that didn't hunt, like, there were plenty of guys that would take their daughter hunting and the daughter's not going to hunt, and the daughter slept in the truck. And so dad or brother or uncle pops a deer, and we go back to little sister and put her tag on the deer. Like tons of stuff like that happened. Everybody did that. But again, it was a seasonal kind of once a year thing. Everybody had the family go fishing all the time because it was this consistent, ongoing resource that had a great deal of value from an economic standpoint. And so if you're not someone that's really taken this on, I would recommend that you at least consider it. Get some really basic gear. You can gear up for well under $100 and go out and learn about the areas around you, learn about the fish that are available, learn out the most basic methods of catching them, learn how to process them. This is an incredibly valuable skill set. And at the same time, it will increase situational awareness of all the resources in your area. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up, and I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Miyagi Mornings. All right, guys, I will hang just a little bit here with you. Let me see if I can see some of the comments that have come in. I'm going to go over and jump on Float first here and hit a little refresh. I'm going to refresh both of those screens real quick just because I have found that sometimes I don't really see the most recent comments when I have everything paused over here. And it just has to be slow today. Okay, great way to look at fishing and hunting from Mountain Zen. Mad Farmer, seems like we all just have a lot of other things going on. We talk about it a lot, but rarely go fishing, making more of an effort this year. I think time is probably the biggest reason for people that don't go as much but like it. I find myself a lot of times going, man, do I go fishing today or do I, work on the show a little bit harder or whatever? And you know what I've found out, though? There's never been a day that I cut out early to go wet a line. And I was like, you know what? I should have done that. It was what a waste of my, like every time I do that, I end up feeling a little bit better. Scrambling says, I slay pink salmon in a cheap ass kayak. They run, I collect. He lives in the Northwest. You guys that live in the Northwest, man, the salmon resource, that was one of the biggest reasons for the success of Native American tribes in the Northwest. Salmon are an incredibly, incredibly valuable resource, as are certain different trouts as well. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. I am still trying to kind of dig out a little bit of a hole from being down with the COVID or whatever. It was never really that bad, but it was just disruptive. Is the way that I would put it. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today. Why don't I tell you, though, who we have for our podcast interview today? Forrest Garvin, he's a U.S. Air Force NCO with the 317th MAC and JSOC SOLL2 out of Pope Air Force Base. Recently left the military. He is the founder or organizer behind PrepperNet, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. PrepperNet, an organization of like-minded individuals who believe in personal responsibility, individual freedoms, and preparing for disasters of all origin. The group is aimed at individuals that have an interest in gaining knowledge, acquiring new skill, and networking with like-minded individuals that are preppers or survivalists. They already have over 60,000 members in 100 cities, so it should be a great interview today. That'll be up later in the day. We will not be live streaming that, just so you know. Take care, guys. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.